So life begins at the end of your comfort zone. We talked about this before in previous weeks. But on to this week. One of the things we're going to talk about is, are you busy or too busy? Not enough time to do your job. MBA program is a job, and that's unlike undergrad, where it's considered part-time or depending on your situation. But one of my observations as a teacher with multiple students is the most common problem is time and what I call self-management. Uh, you know, Whether you realize it or not, everyone is a leader of themselves. You manage your day-to-day activities. This is also a good time to talk about self-evaluation, evaluating how you're going about things and doing things. Are you having problems keeping up or balancing, multiple things? We have habits, be it, I've mentioned sometimes about, the coffee drinkers, you don't go without your coffee. You make sure you do take care of the kids every day. You got routines. You don't just put something off until Sunday night or something like that. So, and again, with the MBA program, it should be a daily thing you're doing. School should be something you do every day. It's a habit, a routine, and then of course you have to manage it. Uh, One point is, do you put 100% in on everything you do, or is it like, oh, you 100% of the kids, or maybe 50%, depending on your situation, but then you only do 10% on school. How do you plan and balance your week out? And, that's an issue I see with students sometimes. So that's why I'm covering this. It may not apply to you, but maybe it does, or you can share this with, people you're mentoring. What do you do in one part of your day is a reflection of what you do in other parts of your life. So I use school as an example. If you're late doing assignments, you don't do the full assignment, or you just do bare minimum, that in reality is a reflection of how you do the rest of your life, your other things in your life, your job, your career. There's different things. Um, I'm sure all of you've seen the same thing I see at different places of business. When you go into places or you interact with people from different types of businesses, you'll see those people who it's just a job to them versus people who are, passionate about their job. So, there's different factors there. Um, and it all comes down to the self-management and time management thing. You have to have realistic and achievable goals when you talk about time management in your life. When I had to do an MBA and then when I did my doctorates, there's things I had to give up. TV was one of them, but there's things you have to balance out. You only have so many hours in the day, and you have to have achievable goals. I use the example of a runner. Somebody doesn't just show up at a marathon on a Saturday and run a marathon. That's not achievable. It's not realistic. You have to practice. So the marathoners, that's what they do. They train to get to that realistic and achievable goal. Again, we're talking about time, of course, managing your time. College is a job. Are you putting in 10, 20 hours a week? That's something I've harped on over the years with students is, it's not something you do for 2 hours on an evening, and especially on MBA, because you're expected to know the material of an MBA. When you go and get a job and you say, hey, I have an MBA, the employer expects that you have it, that you have the knowledge. And when they assign you projects and things like that, that you know how to do this stuff. So that's why it's important that you're putting in the time. And that's why we call it a full-time job. Um, you know, so the other question I'll put to you is, knowing what you know about yourself, would you hire yourself? And now what I'm talking about here is, if you happen to be in a situation with like school here, an MBA program, where you're submitting late assignments, you're not getting things done on time, you fall behind, or whatever the case is, that is a reflection of, of how you approach things. So would you hire somebody that has that same work ethic? Would you hire somebody that you know is not going to put that 10 hours a week in, that you know is not going to get things done on time? And so this is something you should reflect on yourself. You don't have to answer this question. I'm just saying this is a good self-test. You should do. Uh, what did you do with the time you had? I use a pizza store example. In a typical pizza store, a manager will come in at 10 o'clock, and there's usually only one person working inside the store. Maybe there's a delivery driver, but in a pizza store, you got one person. They come in at 10, and part of the job is to take orders during the day, but it's also to prepare everything for the evening. So by 4 o'clock, everything is done, all what they call the prep, and there's a lot that goes into it. So what happens when maybe a supervisor goes in and at 4 o'clock and you find nothing is ready, or only half of the things are ready for the evening, and you ask the question, and the answer is, I did not have enough time. And so I'm basing this on true experiences. So you go back, you look, and you say, okay, you've had 5 orders today, or you had 10 orders. Let's say you had 10 orders today. Okay, so you had to make 10 pizzas. And making a pizza literally only takes a minute. That's a little secret a lot of people may not know. Pizza places, it takes them 1 minute to make a pizza, and they throw it in the oven. Um, a minute to take a phone order, put it in a box, and so let's say you got 10 pizzas, 10 orders, and it took 20 minutes. Even if it took 30 minutes total time, what did you do the other 5.5 hours? And so this was a common line I would get. And what people did was other things. They got distracted. They got busy on something else, or whatever the case is. It might have been just been on the phone. But anyway, so that's my point there is, how do you manage your time? What are you really doing? You've probably seen the video before. I'm going to put the link in again on this week's announcement. The Arnold, it's like a 1-minute video talking about how he manages his time. So that's a good video. Final point is you must self-manage and manage your own time. You have to do that. You may have to give up things. You have to rearrange things, whatever the point is. And again, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. So you may not be comfortable changing, but you have to. And so that's my point for this week. We'll move on to the next part here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to 540 Organizational Management. So this particular course is a little it's focused on the management aspect side. This week you'll have 4 chapters. Introduce yourself. When I did this video, we may have been getting somebody new. So depending if you notice there's a new person in there, then we can go ahead and do the intros. But otherwise, the discussion's the same format pretty much. Just read what's in there, and plus I'll have my post in there, so make sure you're replying to that. The presentation. So this week, first week here, we have Introduction to Management, just management in general, the global business environment, ethics and corporate social responsibility, and strategy. So those are the topics of the chapters. So you got the presentations, discussion. Okay, so your first, you got a competency assignment, and so this is about, it's pretty much straight there. If I know sometimes there's problems with ProQuest. So if you don't have access to it, you should, and if you don't, you need to call and get it. But you can't, as long as the sources are legitimate sources. I joke sometimes about Billy Bob's blog. You can't have that, but if you can have legitimate sources, then you're okay there. So you got a paper, a short paper here, AP format, and then you got a project. So the project right here. Alright, so there's a lot of instructions here, but the basics is, it's about 8 to 12 pages, APA formatting. You got, different parts of the paper. I'm going to scroll down here. You got some some examples there. You're going to, evaluate different aspects, answer some fundamental questions, and then the community resource. So the paper has, the community resource part, and then the the other aspect of it, the other part. So community resources, you're gonna you get in touch with somebody. Now some of you may have already done this in some of the other courses, depending on where you're at. About half the courses have interviews, so you have to do an interview with somebody. Generally, for this type of interview, it should be somebody at a higher level, who has the P&L and HR oversight experience. and then you got these specific questions, and you can add other questions to it too. So for this paper, you have to have three sources. You have ProQuest source, your community resource, community resource interview is one of your sources. So you're going to do, like two other sources, articles and so forth, textbook, things like that, and then that community resource. So, like I said, I think most of you may have already done a community resource, but interview. So, okay, so that's that, and otherwise. Welcome to the next course here. Pretty much the future weeks, you'll have one or two assignments, in there, and that should pretty much cover it all. So, all right. So with that, I'm going to let you go. Otherwise, have a great week. And if you got any questions, just get in touch with me, and that should do it. So just, let me know. Take care. Have a great week.